there's this other New York Times article, which I think is just, they're bandwagoning a bit on the Twitter chaos. And they're sort of highlighting a slightly different aspect. So the Verge article is kind of talking about, I guess people leaving the company and issues around that. But the New York Times article is more focused on misinformation, being on Twitter as a result of perhaps them easing I don't want to say censorship necessarily, but the moderation, I guess, easing the moderation. And specifically, they're talking about what's going on in Maricopa County. So just quoting from the New York Times, more than 40,000 tweets about malfunctioning voting machines in the state's Maricopa County were posted in the span of 2 hours in the morning, according to the Election Integrity Partnership, a coalition of online information researchers. Nearly 90,000 tweets specifically mentioned Maricopa alongside terms like fraud, cheat, or cheating, according to the research group Zignal, which were references to the debunked belief that the glitches were the first signs of widespread voter fraud. And then now it's quoting a professor. There are definitely things we're seeing today that would not have been there if this whole Elon Musk takeover had not happened. Just in the past 24 hours, there is more talk of election fraud rising up to the top. So I just thought it was interesting to kind of talk about this a bit because it does show, it's sort of, we're both, for free speech, right, obviously. But this does show the kind of, I don't tend to believe these reports about fraud or cheating or whatever. I also think it's funny that they quote this professor from Tufts University as if this dude is some, actually, I'm not even sure if it's a man or a male or female, but as if this person is some authority. And, how could this person authoritatively say that there are definitely things we're seeing today that would not have been there if this whole Elon
they
Musk
have no
takeover.
idea.
They have no idea. That's totally made up.
And also, I
Um,
don't. Why is it wrong for people to talk about their theories that there's fraud?
exactly.
Just
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't.
like if you
I don't
think
think
that
it's
that's what
wrong. Yeah.
happened, then go ahead and discuss it. And people who know that there wasn't fraud or have better evidence than you that there wasn't fraud, then they can present that in the public square, and then you
Yeah.
can look wrong. You can look stupid or wrong or whatever you say,
Yeah.
but this is what the discussion is for.
Yeah.
So these people, they're trying to imply that, well, we should never have allowed this discussion. Why? You don't know that there wasn't fraud. Can you say that with 100% certainty?
Right. Not at this point. Or I mean, I don't know if you can ever say
You
that with
can never say
100%.
it.
But
So it should
yeah.
always be allowed. It should always be allowed for people to discuss it.
Yeah.
And if it's a 99.9% certainty that they're wrong and that they're stupid, then it should be easy for people to present evidence that makes them look 99.9% wrong and stupid. And that will fix the problem. That will
I
fix the
think there's
problem. And if you say that doesn't fix the problem, if you say that, well, some people still might be convinced or whatever, then you just don't believe in free speech, do you? Because you just think that people need to be shielded or protected from speech
Mhm.
if it's wrong. You just don't think that people can decide for themselves. One of the core tenets of free speech is that you think that individuals can hear all the information and they're adults and they're thinking adults, they can weed out good information from bad. You have that faith,
Mhm.
fundamental faith in humanity. You if you don't have that faith, then you might be of the opinion that they should never even be allowed to hear it for their
Mhm.
own good. And some people are of that opinion, but here's the thing. A lot of people don't want to own up to being so uh paternalistic, right? Like, oh, you can't hear this. It's for your own good though. Let me decide what you can hear and what you can't hear. That's their position. Most people, they don't want to own up to having such a paternalistic viewpoint, right? Like
Mhm.
they need to make the decision for you. No, they still outwardly say that they believe in free speech principles, but not on this one. Not on this one. You don't need to be hearing this one because you're just too dumb and you might be convinced by this fake news or you might be convinced by no, you're essentially saying that you don't have that faith in humanity that people can hear and make the choice for themselves because you're
Yeah.
saying they'll make the wrong choice. Now, on the other side, which is this is squarely where I reside, I either believe that they're smart enough or we should give them the chance to make the right choice for themselves, to hear everything and decide what's true and what's not based on the evidence, based on what's presented. Or, even more to the point, I think that people have the right to hear all the evidence, to hear everybody's voice, and to ultimately decide on the wrong thing. I think that's your fundamental right. I
Mhm.
I think that's your right. I don't think you only have the right to hear information. Like, you only have the right to hear it if you ultimately will come to the right conclusion, right, guys? You'll come to the same conclusion that I came to. So only in that case do you have the right to hear it. Because if you're going to give any indication that you'll come to the wrong conclusion, I need to act now. I need to step in and make sure you don't hear all these wrong things. That sounds like you're a tyrant. That doesn't
Right.
sound like you fundamentally believe in people's freedom of thought.
Mhm.
It sounds like you don't believe in it, and that you only allow freedom of thought and freedom of speech so long as it agrees with you, which I would argue is fundamentally not being for freedom of thought and freedom of speech. Being for freedom of thought and freedom of speech is being open to the possibility, the very real possibility, that people will hear all the facts, hear all the speech, hear all the evidence presented from one side and the other, and come to a different conclusion than you did. That's what being for free speech and being for freedom of thought means. That you're
It's
open to people coming to a different conclusion, not, oh, I'll only allow it so long as you come to my conclusion. That's not what being for free speech means.
it's interesting that this position really does require some amount of faith in humanity, right? Like, if people were in fact really stupid,
No,
would I'm not sure
I would
if this would
say
necessarily be the best policy. Like, if people,
either you have faith in humanity and that they'll come to the right conclusion, or you're like me. Actually don't have that much faith in humanity. Humanity just elected brain damage to be in the Senate. Okay.
yeah, exactly. I
Okay.
was just gonna say.
However, I still respect humanity's right to do it.
Mhm.
I would rather let you elect brain damage to the Senate than
So
to
basically, yeah,
appoint
you're saying,
myself as some sort of arbiter of what you can see or hear.
yeah. So you respect humanity's right to kill themselves
Correct. Yes.
if they
I
choose
respect
to.
your right to
Yeah,
choose the wrong thing
yeah.
because that's your fundamental freedom. I respect it. I'm not going to prevent what you can see or hear so that the result is the correct result.
I haven't been following the Arizona thing too carefully, so I really don't have, my opinion that it's probably not fraud isn't really based on anything too substantial. And if maybe, I mean, maybe there is fraud going on, but I feel like a lot of these people are uncritically, especially the type of people you see like in Charlie Kirk's, chats and whatever their comments, they're all just highly suspicious of what's going on
It's okay to
in
be
Arizona.
suspicious, but there's
Yeah.
no
I,
evidence.
yeah, people need to just remember that they have to try and think for themselves, I think. So,
I don't mind suspicion, but suspicion is not evidence.
mhm.
Go ahead and say it, and then people can
Yeah, yeah,
decide for
absolutely.
themselves whether or not they feel that this is a compelling argument.
Yeah. I'm gonna make one more point about this the whole misinformation thing. Something that I first heard, I think I heard this on Charlie Kirk, but it's something, the mainstream media is definitely not going to point out. So Charlie Kirk and some of his guests seemed, and one of them seems to be like an expert on Arizona elections. They seem to think that the order in which these votes are getting counted in Arizona, they're saying is favoring the Democrats. They're releasing these counts really slowly, and they're doing it in such a way that for the vast majority of the time, it appears that the Democrats are winning, right? Like, you could just imagine all kinds of different scenarios, right? Like, just imagine the graph of the count versus time, right? And then depending on the order in which you were to count the votes, the graph could look wildly different, right?
Correct,
And
but
and so, yeah, so they're basically saying that like it's unfair that they're purposely counting the votes in a way to make it look like the Democrats are winning. And then if it turns out that the Republicans pull off the offset or an upset at the very end,
It will look like they cheated.
yeah, or
Oh,
it'll basically, yeah, it'll, because everybody has been accustomed right now to thinking, oh yeah, Democrats are going to win, Democrats are going to win. And
right,
then if
right.
it, yeah, if it
Okay,
happens,
but if they count the votes correctly, then it doesn't really matter.
yeah. But I'm just saying that I feel like in some sense you could make the argument that if in fact it is being done on purpose that way, like that's another form of misinformation, you could say.
It is, although there's no proof that that's happening, is there?
I I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
Well, but as long as all the votes are counted correctly, I mean,
Yeah.
yes, it will spur some conspiracy theorists on the other side and say, "Yeah, how come you jumped to the lead at the end?" But that's kind of what,
Mhm.
that's happening with Trump in 2020. Like this big spike of votes in
Mhm.
Pennsylvania that everyone
Yep. Yep.
points to, which reasonably speaking could be reasonable. I mean, it could be logical. It could be just they counted a bunch somewhere else and then they added it in one batch. That's possible.
Their processes seem so slow and opaque that hopefully next election something will change.